Welcome to the world of science fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Enjoy the listening. Ambassador Kavak stood motionless on the bridge of the eternal light, his iridescent scales shifting from their usual confident gold to an uncertain blue-green. After 3 centuries of first contact missions, he had thought nothing could surprise him anymore. He was wrong. Ambassador croaked junior analyst Cyril from the deck, their neural interface still smoking slightly. The readings, they don't make sense. They can't make sense. Kavak gestured to the medical team, who rushed to attend to the fallen analyst, the young Zach Ths. Neural overload was concerning, but what worried Casey more was what it caused it. He turned to face the main view screen, studying the deceptively simple vessels that orbited the blue-green world before them. Show me the sensor logs, he commanded, his secondary hearts beginning to be faster. Raw data, only the holographic display materialized before him, demonstrating what appeared to be laughably crude spacecraft radio waves, chemical propulsion, and metal hulls that wouldn't survive a single round from even their least sophisticated arms. It was precisely what they'd expected to find after tuning into the planet's broadcast, precisely what they prepared for too. Precisely. Supreme Commander KK, Tall Kavak called out, his voice carefully controlled. Would you join me for a moment? The imposing military leader strode forward, her battle-scarred scales a deep crimson of barely contained aggression. Ambassador, we're wasting time. These primitives barely have orbital capabilities. Standard protocol dictates. Look at this energy reading, Kavak interrupted, zooming in on a particular data stream. What do you see? Arxel scales flickered in annoyance, then shifted to pale yellow surprise. That's impossible. The pattern's too smooth. Exactly. Kavak worked the display, overlaid multiple sensor reads. Every read we're getting is precisely what we'd anticipate from a maturing spacefaring race. Not one anomaly, not a single deviation in 300 years of first contact missions. I've never seen anything so precise. A burst of static filled the speakers on the bridge. The human vessels had detected them. Incoming transmission, announced the communications officer. It's primal radio waves, Ambassador, just as we expected. KC scales rippled with dark purple deep concern. Too perfect, he whispered, then louder. Play the transmission. Greetings, unknown vessels. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the United Earth ship Nightingale. We come in peace and welcome peaceful contact. The voice was clear, professional, and spoke in perfect galactic standard, a language that, according to their intelligence, Earth shouldn't have even known. That Arxel scales flushed deep red. Once again, it is a trap. No, Kavak cut her off. Not a trap. Testy stepped closer to the view screen, studying what appeared to be a simple medical vessel. Its hull was scratched, its paint faded, its design utterly utilitarian, yet something about it made his ancestral instincts scream danger. They are testing how we will react, he continued. Everything we're seeing is deliberate. They're showing us precisely what we expected to see. The question is, what are they hiding? As though in answer, their sensors briefly glitched just for a microsecond, and in that instant Kavak caught a glimpse of something else. Energy readings that defied physics, whole compositions that shouldn't exist, and power signatures that made their mighty diplomatic fleet look like toys for children. Then it was gone, and once again replaced by the perfect facade of a primitive fleet. KX turned to Errol, his scales now a mix of fascination and fear. Supreme Commander, I believe we may need to reconsider our approach. We're not dealing with primitives, we're dealing with masters of deception. Your orders? Ambassador, send our RSP response. KC said, his scales settling into a determined purple gold. And pray we haven't already made a terrible mistake in our assumptions. Lieutenant Sarah Chin's fingers hovered over the holographic controls of the UE's Nightingale, her expression carefully neutral despite the sweat beading on her forehead. The ship's true combat interface lay dormant beneath the fake medical console, waiting to come to battle lines on short order. They're scanning us again, reported her Yexo Commander James Rodriguez, his voice low. Third sweep in the last hour. These Zach authority are nothing if not thorough. Sarah nodded, maintaining the facade of a slightly frazzled medical ship. Captain status of the masking systems holding up perfectly as far as they can tell. We're just a converted passenger liner with some minimal medical equipment. James stopped scanning. Another reading, but their young officer, the one with the greenish scales, seemed specifically interested in Bay, for Sarah's jaw clenched. Bay foreheld the Nightingale's quantum torpedo assembly disguised as a regenerative medicine facility. The masking technology would withstand, but the young alien's tenacity was disturbing. The bridge door slid open, allowing their Zack, the visitor's ambassador Casey, stepped forward. With the group, his scales churning through SEL hues of blue and gold behind. Behind him, a junior officer, the intensive scanner vibrated with barely suppressed excitement. Captain Chin, Casey's translator, produced flawless English. Thank you for hosting us. Junior specialist Mick here is particularly interested in your medical capabilities, of course. Sarah smiled. Years of diplomatic training, keeping her voice, even though I should warn you our facilities are quite modest compared to your ADV technology. Mir's scales flickered with what Sarah's upside training identified as barely suppressed smugness. Actually, Captain, I have some questions about the energy readings from your medical bay. They're unusual for healing equipment. Sarah caught James's splee hand signal. The young alien had managed to detect something not enough to breach their cover, but enough to raise questions. Unusual. Sarah kept her tone curious, but slightly worried. Exactly how a lesser-developed species should react. I hope there's something amiss with our machinery. We've only recently replaced our diagnostic scanners. But somehow the combination hasn't played out as smoothly. Myrick edged closer to one of the medical screens, their balance now showing lines of intense focus. These energy shifts, they are uncannily consistent with what we'd see from a contained quantum event, not a medical scan. Behind the alien delegation, James's fingers crept toward the secret arms trigger. Sarah caught his eye and gave a microscopic headshake. Not yet. Quantum reaction. Sarah let confusion color her voice. I'm afraid Earth's understanding of quantum mechanics is still quite basic. Our medical technology relies primarily on traditional imaging methods, magnetic resonance, radiation, sonic. Happing Ambassador Cavax placed a restraining hand on Mir's shoulder, his scowl showing embarrassment. My apologies, Captain. Mirix is young and enthusiastic. Perhaps we could focus on more practical matters. But Merc wasn't done. If I could just run one detailed scan of Bay for Junior Specialist. Kava's voice carried an edge. The transcended species barriers. You forget yourself. The younger alien scales dulled to a chastised gray. My apologies, Ambassador. Captain Sarah waved away the apology, even as she noted how Kavak had intervened. The ambassador wasn't falling for their act. He was too old for that. But he was dancing along, meaning he understood the dance for what it was. Would you like to see our primary care unit? Sarah offered, deliberately diverting them off of Bay for we've recently updated our trauma response protocols. As she led the delegation through the ship's medical facilities, Sarah exchanged a knowing look with James. The Zachari weren't as convinced of human technological inferiority as they pretended to be, and humans weren't as primitive as they appeared. It was, Sarah reflected, going to be an interesting diplomatic mission. Indeed. Supreme Commander Errol stood proudly on the command deck of the Zack Thursday flagship, the Eternal Minion. Her glinting with expectation, the vessel embodied the apex of their race's military power. 3 kilometers of high-tech alloys and state-of-the-art weaponry. Your notice, Earth envoys, she said to the human delegation. We will now show you the capabilities of our newest mark, they and Mural Link Combat System. Lieutenant Shun and her team viewed from the observation deck, their faces suitably OD yet. IGN David Kamar, the youngest of the human officers, seemed more interested in the neural interface panels than the massive weapon arrays being displayed. The system allows for instant response times. Errol continued, her scales rippling with pride. No other known civilization has achieved such perfect synchronization between ship and crew. David raised his hand, a gesture that made several Zack Thursday officers' scales flicker with the amusement at its childlike simplicity. Supreme Commander, may I ask a technical question? Arkle scales showed indulgent superiority. Of course, young one. Have you solved the quantum desynchronization problem in the neural pathway, the one that occurs when multiple operators access the same combat subsystem? The command deck fell silent. Tall scales shifted from confident gold to surprise yellow. So fast it must have been painful. How do you know about that? Demanded Myrick, who had been eyeing the humans like an hawk since the medical bay incident. David blinked innocently. Oh, it's just basic neural interface theory. We ran into similar problems in our initial forays at Direct neural links, the quantum states collapse when early attempts MIRS interrupted. Your species barely has space flight. You can't possibly have a sudden alarm. AR cut through the tension. A nearby asteroid, nearly invisible against the system star, had turned. She was now on a collision course with the assembled fleet. Impact in 30 seconds. A Zach, the officer shouted. Neural interface loading system crashed. The quantum desynchronization. All ships emergency maneuvers. Errol commanded. Her scales now ash gray with fear. The massive Eternal Dominion's engines flared, but the ship's bulk made it move with agonizing slowness. Then something impossible happened. The UE's Nightingale, apparently a ship once, but now a converted medical ship, moved not with the clumsy chemical thrusters it had shown before, but with an elegant precision that defied physics. The vessel split into 3 distinct sections, each moving independently, yet in perfect coordination. What in the name of the first egg? Yarrick breathed. The Nightingale section surrounded the asteroid, and for a brief moment reality itself seemed to bend. A gravitational lens formed between the 3 segments, and the asteroid simply ceased to exist, converted to harmless energy that dissipated into space. The human vessel reassembled itself, once again appearing as nothing more than a humble medical ship. Lieutenant Chen cleared her throat in the stunned silence. Supreme Commander, I believe this would be a good time to discuss the actual capabilities of Earth's fleet. Or rel scales had gone completely white, sign of total shock in her species. That was not simple neural interface technology. No, David offered helpfully. We abandoned neural interfaces centuries ago. 2, limiting our ships use quantum consciousness integration. Instead, the vessels aren't controlled by the crew. They're extensions of the crew. Ambassador KX, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. You've been holding back significantly, just as you have, Ambassador. Sarah replied with a diplomatic smile, though I notice your ship's weapon systems have been quietly charging since we came aboard. KC scales showed a mix of embarrassment and respect. It seems we have much to learn from each other. Indeed, Sarah agreed. For instance, would you like to know how we actually solve the quantum desynchronization problem? It's quite really elegant. As David launched into an enthusiastic technical explanation that had the Zach, the engineer's scales changing colors rapidly. Sarah exchanged a knowing look with Kivak. The real first contact was finally beginning. The asteroid field came alive without warning. What the sensors had dismissed as harmless space debris suddenly accelerated, becoming a deadly cloud of hypervelocity projectiles. The Zach, the fleet's automated defenses, sprang to life, but they were designed to track energy signatures, not chunks of inner rock. Multiple impacts detected. Mix's scales had gone ghost white as she monitored the tactical display. Whole breach on Deck 712 of the Eternal Dominion. Ambassador Kavak watched in horror as emergency force fields failed to contain the decompressions. Our backup systems are offline. How did they know exactly where to permission to assist? Lieutenant Chen's voice came on suddenly. All business. Supreme Commander Aurel Scales had internal conflict, pride wearing with survival. Another impact shook the flagship and his fate, deciding the matter. Granted, Sarah's fingers flew across her neural interface. Night Andale actual to all Earth vessels. Pattern Delta 7 execute. The transformation was breathtaking. The small flotilla of seemingly primitive Earth ships rippled like liquid metal as the Nightingale split again, but differently this time. Each section restructuring into sleek fighting shapes. Other ships evolved their harmless civilian fashions, dissolving to expose brutal efficiency. By the first, Egmerick said, they are not separate ships after all. They're components of a greater system. She was correct. The Earth ships moved in perfect harmony, forming intricate geometric patterns that somehow altered the local space-time geometry. Asteroids that should have warped the Zach, the ships, instead, they found themselves moving through a vacuum. Their courses twisted impossible degrees. IGN Kumar, Sarah commanded, explain to our friends what they're seeing. They've earned that much. David nodded, eagerly pulling up a holographic display. Every human vessel is designed with quantumorphic architecture. We can reconfigure not just our ship's forms, but their fundamental Physical properties. He stressed the Nightingale's changed regions at the time. We are applying crystal structure formation to generate localized gravity lenses. A monstrous asteroid, easily massive enough to bisect the Eternal Dominion in two, approached the fleet. The Earth ships reacted by flowing into a new configuration, a flawless Doha of changed vessels. Watch this, David said with barely suppressed excitement. This is my favorite part. Energy flowed between the Earth ships, and for a moment reality seemed to hiccup. The asteroid didn't explode or change course. It simply ceased to exist at point A and resumed existing at point B, safely past the fleet. Kava's scales had shifted to a deep blue of intellectual fascination. You've mastered localized temporal displacement, among other things, Sarah admitted, though we usually avoid showing off quite this much. The morphic restructuring tends to get other creatures anxious, apprehensive. MX's scales shredded. A confusing blend of fear and exhilaration. You've fully rewritten the laws of physics as we know them, not rewritten, David corrected, only expanded our knowledge of them, though I'd love to show you some of our fundamental theoretical frameworks. Your neural interface technology could use an additional jolt. Cut him off this time. A piece of debris had slipped through their defenses, tearing a massive hole in the Eternal Dominion's primary hull. Without hesitation, the Nightingale's medical section detached and flowed through space like liquid mercury, sealing itself against the breach. Its hull actually merged with the Zach, the vessel structure, creating a perfect seal. That's not possible, Mirik breathed. Hull materials don't work that way. They do, if you understand quantumorphic bonding, David replied cheerfully. Would you like me to explain the principles behind molecular restructuring at the quantum level? It's really quite fascinating. As the young IGN launched into another enthusiastic technical lecture, Sarah and Kavak shared a knowing look. The Zach theory, we're beginning to understand that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology, it was their endless drive to push the boundaries of what was possible. The attack came without warning. 7 dropped out of hyperspace, their hulls painted in the blood-red markings of the notorious Crimson Fang's pirate fleet. Their weapons were already charging, targeting both human and Zach. The ships alike. Well, Lieutenant Shun remarked calmly from the Nils bridge. This should be educational. The pirate's leader, his face obscured by a fearsome combat mask, appeared on all communication channels. Zach theory vessels, Earth vessels. This is Captain Drath of the Crimson Fang's. Power down. Sarah cut the transmission with a casual gesture. Nightingale actual to Earth fleet release pattern. Echo in. Let's show our new friends how we handle uninvited guests. The transformation this time was different from the asteroid incident. Instead of combining into geometric patterns, the Earth vessels seemed to simply fade away. Their running MX's scales flickered with disappointment from her station on the Eternal Dominion's bridge. After all we've witnessed here, watch. Ambassador Kavak cut off his scales, focused intently. Recall what we learned about human deception. The pirate fleet advanced confidently, their sensors detecting only the Zacher ships and what seemed to be fleeing Earth vessels. Captain DRA's laugh resonated across the command channel. He forced himself open. See, these humans are all shown now about our demands. The space behind the pirate fleet rippled. The Nightingale reappeared, but not as a medical ship or even as its previous combat form. Its H had reshaped itself into something that seemed to suck in light itself, its outline dimly visible except where it cut across the stars. Other Earth ships came out of impossible-seeming attitudes. Their altered shapes defined conventional geometry that's not stealth tech. Mirik breathed, their warping light around their nulls, but the energy needs would be moot. David provided helpfully from his temporary station on the Eternal Dominion. We don't use conventional power systems. Each ship generates its own localized universe with slightly modified physical constants. Highly efficient, though it took us a few centuries to work out the math. The pirates attempted to bring their weapons to bear, but the Earth ships were already moving. The Nightingale flowed around the pirate flagship like liquid shadow. Its hull, Aka's ally, intersecting with the other vessel in ways that made MX's neural sensors spark and protest. Quantum phase shifting, David explained, noting her distress, allows us to temporarily share the same space-time coordinates as other matter, useful for disabling enemy systems without destroying the whole ship. Watch this part. The pirate vessels Weapons suddenly went dark, then their engines, then life support one by one. Systems failed as the Earth's ship's phase shifted through their hulls selectively, disrupting crucial components while leaving the crew's unarmed, impossible supreme commanders all breathe her. Scales showing a complex mixture of awe and professional jealousy. The precision require the computational power. Oh, that's not computers, David said brightly. Each ship has a quantum consciousness core. They're essentially alive in their own way, makes precision work much easier. But it took only minutes for your ship to become intelligent. The entire pirate fleet hung in space. The helpless Nightingale reverted to its innocent medical ship disguise, even though everybody there knew precisely how fake that was. Lieutenant Chun to all vessels, Sarah announced, threat neutralized. Ambassador Kavax, would your security personnel like to handle the prisoner transfer? Our brig space is technically reserved for medical quarantine cases, officially speaking of. Course KX's scales showed amused respect. Of course, Lieutenant, though I believe we would be very interested in discussing mutual defense arrangements after this demonstration, naturally, Sarah replied. With a small smile, though, I should warn you what you've seen today, it's barely scratch the surface of what humanity's ships can do from his station, David grinned. At mixed color shifting scales, want me to explain how the phase shifting works. Math is beautiful, especially parts on quantum probability manipulation of the orbital shipyard above Earth materialized slowly through the quantum tunnel, its true form causing MX's scales to shift through every shade of astonishment. What had appeared from a distance as a simple construction facility was actually a massive crystalline structure that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Welcome to Genesis Point. Lieutenant Chen explained to the Zach Theory Delegation, humanity's premier research and development facility. Ambassador Kavak looked at the impossible geometry before them, his scales a deep blue of intellectual fascination. Those patterns, they're self-replicating on a quantum level. Notice that, did you? David grinned from his console. The whole station is actually a single living quantum computer. It evolves and adapts its own structure based on what we're designing. Supreme Commander Ural scales flickered with uneasiness as they approached what appeared to be an ordinary docking bay until it reconfigured itself, molecule by molecule, to perfectly match their ship's whole configuration. Every innovation you see here, Sarah explained as they disembarked, was born from necessity. Computer historical overlay extinction event 1. The air around them shimmered, and without warning, here they were surrounded by a holographic representation of Earth's first brush with extinction. A massive asteroid larger than the one that killed the dinosaurs approached the planet. This was 300 years ago. Sarah continued, our first quantum displacement ships were created here, born from the desperate need to move something too big to destroy. MX's scales paled. You developed quantum teleportation technology in a single emergency. Humans are motivated problem solvers, David offered, especially when our backs are against the wall. The simulation shifted, showing other catastrophes, solar flares that should have sterilized the planet, dimensional rifts that threatened to tear reality apart, and threats that the Zachari had no context to even comprehend. Computer, show them the Lazarus Protocol, Sarah commanded. The air rippled again, revealing a massive chamber where ships were quite literally grown, not built. Crystalline structures expanded, almost like branches, each one evolving eventually into a fully functioning vessel. By the first egg Casey breathed, they're not only living, they're reproducing in some ways, David confirmed. Each ship contains genetic memory from every danger humanity has ever known. They are born knowing how to adapt to just about anything. The Nightingale, she's a 53rd generation vessel. Her grandmother survived the reality wars. Reality wars mixed scales showed both horror and curiosity. Let's save that story for another time, Sarah interjected smoothly. The point is, everything you see here was developed for one purpose: survival. We didn't set out to become the most technologically advanced species in known space. We just couldn't afford not to be. They approached a viewing window overlooking a testing chamber inside a new ship, getting pummeled through its paces, its form shifting between configurations faster than the eye could follow. That's the next generation, David explained proudly. They can rewrite local physics on an even smaller scale. we're hoping to eliminate the need for weapons entirely, just temporarily suspend the laws of physics inside enemy vessels until they surrender. KX's scales shifted to a deep purple of respect and concern. Your species, you're not just ahead of us technologically, you're operating on an entirely different level of existence. Maybe Sarah recognized, but we're still human, we still make mistakes, still feel fear, still hope for peace. That's why we maintain the facade of simple vessels. In basic technology, we don't want to frighten potential allies or provoke potential enemies. A sudden alert caught their attention on a nearby quantum show. A vessel in the experimental room had just done something that nothing else ever had. It had created a stable pocket universe within its sleeve. Oh wow! David exclaimed, his eyes shining with excitement. That's new. Want me to explain how it works? It uses some very interesting applications of string theory. And as the young IGN launched into another enthusiastic explanation, Sarah noticed that she herself was both afraid and fascinated. To the scale patterns of their guests, were finally beginning to understand humanity's ships weren't just vessels of war or exploration, but the physical embodiment of humanity's greatest strength, the ability to turn existential threats into opportunities for growth. And the warning came from the Eternal Dominion's quantum sensors, technology recently modified with human insights. A fleet of Zaki warships dropped out of hyperspace, their hull markings identifying them as belonging to the purest sect, a radical religious faction blasphemers. The transmission cut across all frequencies. You dare to corrupt our sacred technology with human abominations. Sarah exchanged glances with Ambassador KX, whose scales had shifted to a sickly gray. Friends of yours, the purest sect, Kavak explained, his voice tight. They believe technological advancement should follow a predetermined divine path. What you've hinted to us, they would regard it as an insult to their deities. The leader purist vessel unleashed a barrage of quantum-tipped warheads, weapons that could rip apart reality itself. Nightingale, Sarah called out, speaking directly to her ship via their quantum link time to show them something really blasphemous. Initiate Prome Protocol. The medical ship's response wasn't in words but in action. Its hull began to glow with an inner light that seemed to bend rainbow colors into impossible new cues. Similar transformations rippled through the other Earth vessels. What are they doing? MIM demanded, her scales flickering between fascination and fear as she monitored the sensors. These energy readings, they're rewriting quantum probability itself. Not exactly, David explained, his fingers dancing across his the law. We're just persuading local space-time that the warheads had 0% chance of existing. It's really quantum probability manipulation on a macro scale. The warhead simply winked out of existence. No explosion, no debris, not even radiation. They simply became one of the universe's many unrealized possibilities. The purest fleet responded by charging their main weapons, planet killers capable of reducing worlds to atomic ash. Heretics, their leader screamed, die with the honor you have forsaken, Lieutenant Supreme Commander. Arel's scales showed genuine concern. Even your advanced technology can't watch, Sarah said softly. Nightingale, phase 2. The Earth ships moved in perfect synchronization, their transformed hulls creating a pattern that hurt to look at with normal vision. Reality seemed to hiccup, and suddenly the purest fleet found themselves trapped inside a localized time dilation field. There weapons are still charging, Sarah explained calmly. They're just doing it at 1/1,000,000th normal speed. Gives us time to talk. From the purest vessel's perspective, only microseconds had passed. To everyone else, they appeared frozen in space, caught in the act of their attempted genocide. You could destroy them, Kavak observed, his scales showing a complex mixture of emotions. Why don't you? Sarah's expression softened. Because that's not who we are. Computer established quantum connection with purest fleet consciousness cores. MCK's scales rippled in surprise. Their ships don't have. They do now, David grinned. We just quantumly evolved their computer cores about 300 years into the future. Give it a minute. The purest vessels suddenly powered down their weapons. Their ship systems had literally become too advanced to be used for destruction, having evolved past the need for violence. This is what we do, Sarah explained to their stunned audience. We don't destroy, we elevate. Every ship in their fleet now has the same basic quantum consciousness as ours. They've been enlightened. You might say the time dilation field dissolved. The purest fleet hung motionless in space, their crews presumably trying to comprehend their ship's sudden evolutionary leap. You didn't just stop them, Kavak realized, his scales showing deep purple. Knowing you changed them made them the very change they feared. The simplest way to overcome an enemy, Sarah quoted with a slight smirk, is to make them your friend, even if it means adapting their battleships to get it done. David was already pulling up complicated quantum equations. Want me to explain how we handle the consciousness transfer? The math behind consciousness evolution is very elegant. As the young Ijin launched into another impassioned explanation, Sarah noted the observer scales had all shifted to the same hue, the deep blue of profound revelation. They finally grasped that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology, it was their humanity itself. A month after the purest sect incident, the Genesis Point shipyard hosted an unprecedented event. Representatives from all over the their confederation gathered to see the birth of the first interspecies human-alien ship. The vessel dangled in space before them, its crystal hull embracing both human quantum architecture and Thursday neural interface designs, its name written in both human and The script glistened on the bow. Convergence beautiful, isn't she? David asked MCK, whose scales shimmered with anticipation as they watched the quantum readings. The young officer had just become the first of her species to fully interface with a quantum consciousness core. The consciousness integration is perfect, Mirix replied, her scales shifting through patterns of joy and wonder. I can feel her thinking evolving. She's already adapted my neural patterns into her base consciousness. Lieutenant Chun and Ambassador Cav stood at the primary observation window watching as the convergence performed its first transformation sequence. The vessel's hull flowed like liquid starlight, demonstrating perfect harmony between human quantum manipulation and theory precision engineering. Did you ever imagine this? Kavak asked, his scales showing deeply contemplative patterns. When you first detected our fleet, did you think we'd end up here? Sarah smiled. Honestly, we hoped. That's why we maintained the facade of lesser technology. We wanted to find allies who could see past appearances, who could understand why we chose to hide our true capabilities. And now, Supreme Commander Zal approached, her scale showing new patterns that hadn't existed in the culture before contact with humans, patterns of philosophical curiosity. Now Sarah gestured to the convergence as it completed another beautiful transformation. We evolved together. The ship suddenly pulsed with energy, its quantum sensors detecting something at the edge of known space. Both human and theory crews tensed, but this time they moved as one. Unknown contact, David reported, working in perfect sync with MIRS energy signature. Nothing in either of our databases. The convergence responded without prompting, its hybrid consciousness adapting to the new situation. The ship's hull reconfigured into a form that incorporated the best of both species' defensive technologies while adding something entirely new, a configuration that neither humanity nor the theory had seen before. She's innovating. Mears breathed, her scales showing pure joy, creating new configurations based on both our species' experiences. The unknown contact resolved itself a peaceful exploration vessel from an even more distant civilization, drawn by the unique energy signatures of their joint experiment. First contact. Kavak mused, his scales showing oust irony again, but this time, Sarah said with a warm smile, we make it together. No masks, no deceptions, just two species who learned to combine their strengths. The convergence initiated first contact protocols that merged human diplomatic subtlety with the ceremonial precision. As they watched the ship operate, David turned to Mirik with excitement burning in his eyes. Want to help me explain to them how we merge quantum consciousness with neural interfaces? The math is absolutely gorgeous, especially the parts about consciousness harmonics across species boundaries. As the young officers launched into their now familiar, enthusiastic technical discussion, Sarah and Kavak shared a knowing look. The ambassador's scales showed a pattern that perfectly matched the human expression of contentment. Kavak, we saw when we first discovered your primitive ships, we thought we were to take a younger race to the stars, and instead you showed us that true progression doesn't consist in the technology you have, but in how you apply your ships. Weren't only concealing their capacities, they were teaching us the merits of wisdom above power. Sarah nodded, watching as the Convergence initiated peaceful contact with the new arrival. The best vessels aren't the ones that can destroy worlds, she said softly. They're the ones that can bring worlds together around them. Human and Zach, the crews, worked in perfect harmony, their differences becoming their greatest strength. The future stretched before them, bright with possibilities as humanity and their new allies prepared to face it together, not as teacher and a student, yet equals in the grand dance of cosmic evolution.